Let me introduce you to her. She's the woman I've been living with since you left for your parents' house."
He laughed while wrapping his arm around the woman, who was clinging to him in nothing but a robe. While I was at my parents' for the birth of our twins, my husband moved his mistress into our home. The mistress acted as if she had been living there all along.
"It's your fault for getting pregnant. You stopped doing housework and wouldn't even sleep with me. There's no point in staying married."
He always insisted that pregnancy wasn't an illness, despite how severe my morning sickness was. He began to resent me, calling me useless and making me feel worthless. He shouted at me, trying to justify his actions and intimidate me with his cold demeanor. Even after the birth of our children, his attitude didn't change. The loud noise startled the newborns, and they started crying.
"I'm divorcing you. Take those noisy brats and get out."
Holding my children close, I prepared to leave, feeling helpless. It may seem irrational, but I had a powerful ally who could turn the situation around. That ally was my father, who could reveal a secret that would wipe the smug look off John's face.
"The one who'll be hurt by this divorce is you." "What are you talking about? This has nothing to do with you. Get out of here with her."
He looked John straight in the eye, exuding a calm but intimidating presence.
"You really don't know, do you?"
The words that came out of my father's mouth turned John and his mistress pale. "My name is Mary, and I'm 60 years old this year. I have twin children, a boy and a girl. I named my son Ethan and my daughter Claire, hoping they would grow up to be strong and kind. Their father's name is John. We met during my college years. He was 3 years older and a senior. John lost his parents early and supported himself through scholarships and part-time jobs. He was academically brilliant and very handsome, but he kept a low profile at college, probably to avoid unwanted attention. Despite the hardships he faced at a young age, he was determined to pave his own way, and I admired him deeply. After relentless efforts, we started dating when I was a sophomore and he was in graduate school. Our relationship thrived even after John graduated and started working. He got a job at a prestigious financial firm, a place hard to get into, especially in the competitive market. He excelled as a sales representative, earning a high income compared to others his age, and became quite popular. His success made him proud, and over time it started to change him. The once modest and quiet John began to spend money lavishly, and became more ostentatious in his behavior. Sometimes I wondered why, but at the time I was too blinded by love to see the red flags. After I graduated, I got a job as an administrative assistant at a real estate firm. 2 years later, I found out I was pregnant. John acknowledged the pregnancy, and we soon got married. I thought I was at the peak of happiness, but not everything was perfect. Starting from my second month of pregnancy, I was hit with severe morning sickness. It was so bad that I could barely get out of bed, and I ended up missing a lot of work. Back then, there weren't as many maternity leave options, and many women left their jobs after getting married or pregnant. Not wanting to burden my company further, I decided to quit and focus on protecting my baby. But John didn't seem pleased with my decision. He would come home from work, see me lying in bed, and sigh.
"You're slacking off again. The house is a mess and there's no dinner ready. You've been like this since you got pregnant."
I spent the entire day throwing up. I couldn't even keep water down. I'm scared that the baby might not be okay.
"Pregnancy isn't a disease. You didn't have to quit your job. I'm not okay with this. I work late every day and you can't even manage the house."
John started to despise me, thinking I was using my pregnancy as an excuse. His cold, intimidating gaze made me fearful, and I had no choice but to obey him, no matter how much I was suffering. My pregnancy progressed, but my condition didn't improve. John believed that a man's place was at work, and a woman's was at home. No matter how much I asked for help, he refused to lift a finger around the house. My condition worsened until I was diagnosed with a high-risk prenatal depression. After consulting with my doctor, I decided to return to my parents' house in the city to rest and prepare for the birth. Being away from John brought me some peace of mind. But that peace didn't last long. I received a phone call on my parents.
"Leaving the house is irresponsible. I can't even manage meals or laundry without you. Don't expect to shirk your duties and lean on your parents."
"Please don't say that. I need to focus on the birth."
"Are you defying me? You're nothing without me. Don't bother coming back."
He hung up the phone and I sank to the floor by the entryway, terrified by his threatening words. Why doesn't he care about me or our children? Where did the John I respected go?
"What's wrong, Mary?"
My father noticed something was off and gently helped me to my feet, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. He was always so warm and kind, and I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. My father called my mother, and they sat me down to talk. I told them everything about John's mistreatment during my pregnancy. I was scared that if his behavior continued after the birth, it would harm not just me, but the children too. I confessed that I was considering divorce and apologized for being such a burden to them.
If you want a divorce, that's okay. This is your home too, so you can always come back. And there's no need to apologize. If anything, you should thank us. That would make your mother and me feel better.
My father smiled, breaking the tension, and my mother gave a soft smile as well. Their smiles made me feel as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my heart. For the first time since my pregnancy, I felt a sense of hope. John didn't contact me after that call. I couldn't bring myself to return home, so I had no idea how he was living, and I didn't have the courage to reach out. A few months later, I gave birth to healthy twins, a little earlier than expected. I named them Ethan and Claire, names I had chosen early in my pregnancy. When I asked John for his opinion, he had simply said, "Whatever," showing no interest. So I made the decision on my own. My parents loved the names and affectionately called their grandchildren by them. My father informed John about the birth, but he said he was too busy with work to visit the hospital. As a first-time mother with 2 newborns, I couldn't have raised them alone without my parents' support. Even after a month had passed, John still hadn't come to see the children. My plan was to return home after a month, and my father had informed John, but John never came to pick us up. In the end, my father drove me, Ethan, and Claire back to the house where John was. I was nervous about seeing John again, but with my father there, I felt a bit more secure. I hoped that seeing the children might bring out the father in John. With Ethan in my father's arms and Claire in mine, we stood at the front door. I opened the door with a sense of trepidation, but what I saw inside was beyond my worst nightmares. There, alongside John's shoes, was a pair of tall, high heels that I would never have worn during my pregnancy. They weren't mine. I was shocked. If those shoes were here, it meant John was inside with another woman. Dazed, I stumbled into the house.
"Wait, Mary!"
My father sensed something was wrong and tried to stop me, but it was too late. I opened the living room door to find John and likely the owner of the heels sitting together. Their clothes were scattered all over the floor. Seeing the naked pair in front of me frantically trying to cover themselves was a pitiful sight. To shield Claire's eyes, I covered her face with a blanket. "John, what's going on? How could you betray me and the kids?" I demanded answers, but before John could respond, my father holding Ethan joined me. John and his mistress were shocked, but quickly recovered and started laughing shamelessly.
Let me introduce you. This is Lisa, one of my coworkers. She moved in after you left for your parents."
Lisa was a pretty woman with striking features who looked me straight in the eye as if she had lived there all along. "Sorry, but John told me you didn't do anything around the house, and that's how we ended up together. But it's really your fault. You left this wonderful man alone while you were pregnant."
"I never wanted to get married. I wanted to focus on my career and enjoy life more. It's your fault for getting pregnant. You stopped doing housework and wouldn't even sleep with me. There's no point in staying married."
John's raised voice startled Ethan and Claire, who started crying.
"Ugh, so annoying. This is why I hate kids. I'm divorcing you. Take those noisy brats and get out."
"That's right. This is our home now." Watching John hold Lisa, I felt like I was looking at a beautiful but painful painting. "You should be holding our newborns, not her." I wanted to say it, but the words wouldn't come out. The shock of the situation and my postpartum depression clouded my mind. I held Claire tightly and turned to leave, following my father to the door. "Dad, let's go."
"Wait a minute. You think you can just walk away, John? The one who's in trouble here isn't Mary, it's you."
My father's voice was low and stern, unlike anything I had ever heard from him.
"What are you talking about? This has nothing to do with you. Get out of here with her."
He looked John straight in the eye, exuding a calm but intimidating presence.
You really don't know, do you?"
The words that came out of my father's mouth turned John and his mistress pale.
"What are you talking about? Today was a good day to bring my business card."
He handed Ethan to me and pulled out a business card from his pocket. Reluctantly, John took the card and looked at my father's profession.
"A corporate lawyer?" "Yes, I'm the legal advisor for several major companies in the city, including the one you work for, the MU Group."
"That's a lie."
"It's not a lie. I've been with the MU group for years. I even helped you get your job there. What? Oh. When you were job hunting, you came over for dinner, remember? You talked about your dream of working at MU group, and I liked you. I mentioned you to the hiring manager. I never knew that. I didn't tell you because I figured you had your pride. But now, I see that as a mistake. What do you mean? An affair like yours goes against the MU group's values of integrity and could damage the company's reputation. They're already investigating your behavior at work. I've been keeping an eye on you ever since I noticed how you treated my daughter. I've gathered evidence of your misconduct.
My father pulled out some photos and documents from his bag, showing proof of John's behavior. I had no idea my father was doing all this behind the scenes.
Here are the results of my investigation. You've been abusing your power at work, harassing younger employees, and having inappropriate relationships with women in the office. Your punishment is being discussed, but you'll likely be fired. That can't be true. And about this apartment, you said Mary should leave, but actually it's you who needs to go. This apartment belongs to me. What? The previous owner wanted to sell due to old age, so I bought it. You were notified, but it seems you didn't read the notice. I don't want to get too harsh, but if you continue to disrespect my daughter and claim this place, I'll have you evicted.
John looked too shocked to respond, and Lisa clung to him, seeking a reassurance. But nothing could stop my father now.
You've brought shame to my name, but more importantly, you've mistreated my daughter and grandchildren. I won't forgive you. Prepare yourself.
That's it, John. I'm divorcing you. I'll work with my father to ensure you pay alimony and child support. And Lisa, I'll be suing you for damages. No! I turned away from John, making sure the children didn't see him, and left. As I left, I caught a glimpse of John on the floor, hands on the ground, shaking his head in frustration. Our divorce was finalized. John lost his job and was evicted from the apartment, left with nothing. According to my father, Lisa had only been after John's money. After he lost everything, she disappeared. The alimony was paid, but it came from Lisa's parents, who were furious with their daughter and disowned her. Lisa was fired from her job, and in desperation, she started working at a nightclub. After the divorce, I stayed at my parents' house with the twins. I considered living independently, but my parents insisted on staying together to help raise the kids. Watching Ethan and Clara sleep peacefully, I thanked my father. Dad, thank you for everything you did back then.
It's all right, Mary. I'm just glad I could protect you. That's what made me feel good. You'll understand one day.
At that time, I didn't fully grasp what he meant by that. My children, following my father's teachings, grew up understanding the importance of gratitude. Nearly 20 years have passed since then, and my father passed away 2 years ago. He was diagnosed with cancer, but by the time it was found, it was too late. He lived his last days with a smile on his face. Throughout the funeral, I silently thanked him for everything. Around the same time, John stopped paying child support, even though he promised to continue until the kids graduated from college. The payments dwindled until they stopped completely. It was as if he had waited for my father to die before disappearing again. With my elderly mother needing care, I didn't have time to look for John, so I gave up on finding him. Fortunately, my father left a large inheritance, allowing Ethan and Clara to attend college and pursue their dreams. 10 years later, John was still missing, and Ethan and Clara were now 30. My mother had passed away, and the kids had moved out, so I sold the house and started living alone. One warm day in May, I heard the doorbell ring. When I opened the door, Ethan was standing there. "What's up, Ethan?"
I brought your favorite cake, Mom. Let's eat it together.
"Oh, that's rare. I'm happy. Come on in." I invited Ethan in and started preparing tea. After graduating from college, Ethan became a successful surgeon at a large hospital in the city. He chose this path after seeing my father diagnosed with terminal cancer, vowing to save as many lives as possible. I worried about his health with his long hours, but he was passionate about his work, and I was proud of him.
You know, something interesting happened the other day.
Ethan sipped his tea, and I listened curiously. It was something shocking. My former husband, John, were admitted to the hospital where Ethan works. When Ethan saw the name on the chart, he couldn't believe it, but it was John, who had been missing for nearly 10 years. John walked into the exam room with a woman about Ethan's age. When he saw Ethan's name and face, John was shocked.
What are you doing here? I'm your surgeon. No way!
John recognized his son from the tear mole under Ethan's eye, a feature John would remember. He suddenly became terrified and started pleading with the nurse.
Please, transfer me to another doctor. If you don't, he'll kill me. What are you talking about?
The woman with him, and likely his second wife, looked confused.
I abandoned him and his mother when he was a baby. I ran away after my father-in-law died, refusing to pay child support. You must hate me. Do I hate you? Of course I do. I knew it! You'll botch my surgery on purpose. Please don't kill me. I'll pay the money I owe with interest, even if I have to borrow it.
John's panic made him blurt out everything. His new wife, unaware of his past, was horrified and left him right then and there. John was escorted out of the room by the nurse, his outburst echoing in the hallway. Other patients were disturbed by the commotion. I was shocked and embarrassed that such a coincidence had dragged Ethan into John's mess. I never expected something like that to happen.
I would have done my job, even if I hated him, but after that outburst, I had to step down as his surgeon.
That makes sense. What happened next? I can tell you that. It was my daughter, Claire, who had entered the room without me noticing. The woman who was with him came to me for a divorce consultation. She wanted a large settlement. Claire had followed in her grandfather's footsteps and become a lawyer, passing the bar while still in college. She now worked at a nearby law firm, preparing to start her own practice. Her new client had no idea who Claire was when she came to ask for help. She said her husband deceived her, so I asked for his name and it clicked. That's quite the coincidence. I hope John has learned his lesson. It was clear that neither of my children had forgiven John enough to call him their father. Not at all. I handed the case over to a senior lawyer who specializes in divorces.
What a hopeless guy. He was never a father to us, so I don't feel any sympathy for him.
Me neither. I never felt like I missed having a dad. I had Mom, and Grandpa and Grandma were kind to us. They smiled, thinking back to their childhood. If my father hadn't stepped in that day, I would have had to raise them in terrible conditions. I'll always be grateful to my parents for showering my kids with love. I often wonder if I did enough as their mother. By the way, Claire, what about that thing you mentioned? It should be here soon. Just as Claire glanced at the clock, the doorbell rang again. Ethan stopped me from getting up, and Claire went to answer the door. I was puzzled by their behavior. Claire returned, holding a bouquet of red carnations.
Today is a day to show appreciation to Mom.
A few months later, after his encounter with Ethan, John unexpectedly deposited the unpaid child support into my account in one lump sum. Just as he had promised, he must have borrowed money to do it. John's surgery was successful, but he remained a pariah at the hospital until his discharge.
I've never dealt with a patient like that.
After his discharge, John faced even more hardships. His second wife sued him for a large sum of money enraged by his deception and affairs. Claire, as our lawyer, made sure John paid up. John tried to move in with another woman, but she had no interest in dealing with his mess and disappeared. John was left with nothing but debt, facing a lonely, miserable old age. It was his own doing, and I had no sympathy for him. Years passed, and Ethan and Claire both met wonderful partners and got married. I now have adorable grandchildren who visit me often. Surrounded by the love of my family, I'm enjoying a peaceful and happy retirement.